Thanks, everybody, for having me. What Micah leaves out of that story is that that was probably my second pitch meeting for SOLS. I was sweating and terrified, and I was carrying, I think, this plastic bag full of these sort of 3D printed TPE rubberized insoles that were sort of like falling apart on the desk. And I was like, oh, but orthotics and insoles. And I walked out of that meeting thanking myself that I had made it through it, but learning something very, very important with lots of lessons to take forward into to further pitch meetings. So. I stand here today as an entrepreneur really in the thick of it. In the past year and a half, we have gone from 0 to 40, from no money and me at my house sort of modeling things in SolidWorks to me with actually a Cornellian grad who's in the audience today and was our first hire, sitting in front of a computer modeling things together in SolidWorks, to having 40 people and $8 million in the bank and a network of 150 doctors actively using our software each and every day. And it's been incredibly inspiring and also stressful and hard to take that journey, and I hope I can impart some of the lessons to you, but also talk today about some of the things that I'm really, really excited about and some of the opportunities that I see around the space that we're working in hardware and software. So when I speak at these kinds of events, I can't help but think back to when I was in high school. And I was just graduating, and I was 18. I went to this very fancy college prep school, and everybody was going to fancy colleges and going to like Harvard and Stanford and Cornell. And my guidance counselor asked me, where do you want to go? And I said, oh, I'm going to go to art school. She was like, how about we go back and think about that a little bit? How about we put some backups in there? I was like, no, I'm going to go study design. And not only am I going to study design, but I'm going to study design at art school. And New York is where you do that. So I'm going to go to New York to study design at Pratt, because I had gone to Pratt when I was 16, and I had found New York, and I thought, this is where things are happening. This is where people are doing things. This is where companies are being made. This is where the world is changing, and I want to be a part of that. So it was the only school I applied to. Thank God I got in. And I came here to study design, got out of school. My parents were like, what are you going to do with your life? I was like, I'm going to start a company, because I wanted to make my designs possible. My mom was like, please no, we spent so much on your education. And I was like, no, I'm going to start this company. It's going to be fine. So I did that, and it failed miserably. Did that for the next 4 years. And then, much to, like we earlier heard, I thought, OK, well, I obviously don't know how to run a company, although I did feel a little bit like that was getting an MBA. I'm going to go work for a company that can teach me things. I'm going to go work for people that are at this mid-stage startup size, around, I think, 40 people at the time. And they're going to teach me things, and then I'm going to take those skills that I learned, and I'm going to apply them to whatever I do next. And I did that. And I think it's amazing, an amazing way to become an entrepreneur, an amazing way to learn things. And even though at the time, I remember thinking to myself, like, God, I'm working so many more hours than I should be, and I'm not getting paid enough, and I'm upset, and I don't know how to do this, and I'm overwhelmed. All of those things, that's what it's like to work at a startup. That's what it's like to, frankly, run a startup. And it's just part of it. And you sort of, you do it, and you love it, and you do it because you want to build the world that you live in, and you want to change the world that you live in, and you don't want to accept the status quo. You want to come up with ideas and make those ideas real and execute on that vision. So I'm pretty excited about that. So how did SOLS start? A year and a half ago, I was working at that company. I was working at Shapeways. I had been hired to build and run a factory for them, which was pretty incredible, seeing as I had an industrial design degree and did not know anything about engineering. They're like, do you know how to build a factory? And I made a spreadsheet, and I was like, I can save you all this money if you just let me build a factory. And they were like, OK, nobody else is doing it, so someone's got to. Thankfully, I did a pretty incredible job of it. I was building this 3D printing factory. I was running this 3D printing factory. I was doing it all in stilettos because I really, really loved footwear. And I was like, as long as I'm doing this, like, I'm going to do it how I want to. And one day I got to work, and my feet hurt. And I thought to myself, here I am running this incredible factory. We're producing thousands and thousands of unique 3D printed things per day, and my feet hurt. And then I looked at the outside world, and I thought, hey, we're starting these amazing, amazing companies. We're innovating in healthcare, and we're innovating in medicine, and we're innovating in space travel and automation and machines and manufacturing, and all these cool things are happening. All these massive real-world problems are being solved, and yet my feet hurt. So why is that? And why is it that we have a tendency to overlook these very, very simple and these very common everyday problems? And so I thought to myself, I'm going to change that. So I left that company. Soon after, I met Micah, and I started fundraising for SOLS, dynamic insoles engineered to change the way you move. But here, today, I'm not here to talk about SOLS. I'm not here to talk about orthotics or podiatry or orthopedics or any of that. I'm here to talk about the software behind the hardware. I'm here to talk about why, as a 40-person company, 15 people at our company are software engineers. They're working across back-end and front-end and mobile and advanced technology and computer vision and machine learning. And why is it, as a product company that's producing a physical good, is software such an important component? And more importantly than that, how can we use software? How can we use software to evolve our physical world in the same way that we evolve our digital world? Sometimes I look outside and I see the world that we live in, and particularly around construction sites like that, and I see buildings being made, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, we have all these amazing tools. We have so many startups that are innovating in the digital sector, and yet our physical world evolves so slowly. Why is that, and what tools are missing to change that? So that's what we're doing at SOLS. We're asking that question, and we're building something that I like to call product as a service. So what do I mean by this? Digital manufacturing and design that enable the rapid development of physical goods. We may be a product company, but our product is created with software. It is literally a Python script that generates SOLS. Now, I told everybody back at the beginning that this was the way it was going to work, and I think everybody thought I was a little crazy. And yet, in the past year and a half, we have built a system, we have built a platform that enables product development in a 95% automated way that is driven with software. And that's pretty amazing. So before I dig into how we're doing that and why it's important and what kind of impact that's going to have in our world, I want to look back a little bit at footwear historically and at manufacturing historically. If we look back at manufacturing, we go way back to this age of cobblers, we see that we have customization. We see that somebody can go to the cobbler and they can get a pair of custom shoes made. I'm sure some of you have been to the shoe man that maybe lives on your block, and you've taken in a pair of boots that you really liked, and you said, hey, you know, can you fix this heel because I really want to keep wearing these? I mean, I do this all the time. But before, that was really it. Like, people went to cobblers and they got custom footwear made, and it was inaccessible and it was expensive. And we said, hey, this really isn't working. So let's go from that notion of this one-off product development to mass manufacturing. We have this rise of mass manufacturing. We think everybody should have footwear. Everybody should have accessibility to footwear. And to do this, we need to standardize. To do this, we create sizes. So we lump people into categories, size 7, size 8, size 9, size 10. And what we get is this fairly mediocre product that everybody can afford. Enter today. Today, we have digital manufacturing. Digital manufacturing enables the customization of the cobbler with the affordability of the factory. How? At SOLS, what we've done is we've created a system that combines scanning, creation, and printing, or digital manufacturing. If you look back at the past 5 years, we have seen amazing developments in 3D printing. We have seen Dita Von Teese walk down the runway in a fully articulated 3D printed gown. We have seen the rise of the hobbyists and the maker movement. We have seen small businesses like my business that I started before be enabled by digital manufacturing and be enabled by 3D printing. We have seen children, 10-year-olds, all over the world have access to 3D printers and MakerBots and create prosthetics at a fraction of the price that the bigger companies can do it. But in my opinion, none of that matters. None of that matters unless we're building systems that enable not just that one child, not just that one 10-year-old in Colorado to create a 3D printed prosthetic, but literally everybody in the world that needs that, until everybody in the world can walk out the door every day and say, hey, I'm wearing custom footwear, and they're affordable, and they're perfect for me. Until everybody can have access to these same tools and this same level of product. So why is digital manufacturing making this possible, and why was this not possible before? Suddenly, because of on-demand manufacturing, because of 3D printing, we have these 6 core components which have now entered the landscape. We have the ability to reduce upfront costs to a place where there's virtually almost no cost to start a hardware company. We have a world in which complexity is free, and anything I think of, I can make. We have a world in which the unit of one is possible, and the economies that come with scale have changed. We have a world in which we can live with no inventory, where speed to market is possible at a much, much faster rate than ever before in the past, and where products that are digitally manufactured can be repeated again and again and again, removing the notion of craft from customization. So what I want to do is I want to dive into these 6 core things, and I want to talk a little bit about how they're going to impact the world, how they could impact the businesses that you're going to start, and ultimately why they matter to my company and why they matter to SOLS. Low upfront cost. I think back to when I started my last company, Design Glut, and we were going to China, and we talked to these manufacturers, and they'd tell us it would take $10,000 or $20,000, you know, $30,000, $40,000 to make tooling and minimum production runs. And I would look at the emails, and I'd just be like, I don't have that money, and we weren't fundable. It was not a fundable company. So where are we going to get it from, and how are we going to pay for it? Now, obviously, we have platforms like Kickstarter that enable these sorts of things, but at the time, that didn't exist. What digital manufacturing has done is it has enabled the maker to become the manufacturer. It has removed those barriers. It has removed the idea that you have to have a ton of capital to start a manufacturing company, that you have to have a ton of capital to start a hardware company. And as a result of that, what we've seen is an incredible renaissance with hardware companies. I spent yesterday mentoring over at the Techstars RGA accelerator, and I was amazed by the companies with $100,000 that have been given to them through the accelerator and the businesses that they were building with that. They had working prototypes, they had teams, they had ideas, they were testing in market. None of this would have happened and none of this was possible, let's say 5 years back. Free complexity. If any of you have ever seen a 3D printed object, it probably had some sort of like weird lattice or lace structure to it. And this is really an effective new technology syndrome. This is when people get excited by a new technology and they're like, oh, I can do anything and I can make these structures. And those structures weren't possible before, so let me do that. But this goes so much beyond that. With the structures possible with digital manufacturing, suddenly we have the potential to revolutionize product categories in a way that haven't seen innovation in so long. Casts, I think, are an incredibly interesting one, where before, if you broke your arm, you know, you'd get this incredibly cumbersome plaster cast, and it would be hot, and it would be sweaty, and it would probably itch, and you know, it would be difficult to shower, and maybe your mom at some point like put a plastic bag over it, and it was really a pain. But now what you see with 3D printing, we have these beautiful breathable structures that are incredibly lightweight that you may even be excited to wear. And while your friends aren't writing their name on it, it's an incredible step forward with what the technology can do in a real world way. And not only can we use these structures for things like that, but we can use them to create multi-material products in a way that's never before been possible. We traditionally think of multi-material as like laminating a silicone piece to a plastic piece. But if you look at what we're doing at SOLS, you can see here in the heel of our orthotic, we've engineered actually this dual-layer trampoline-like system that mimics the feel of a silicone or a gel. And we've done it in one material, and we've done it as a product that comes straight out of the printer. A lot of work, should not be underestimated, a lot of work went into developing that heel right there, and it's an incredible way to use materials, I think, in new ways. The unit of one. Affordable mass customization, right? This is possible now. This exists today. This is the COBBLER in 2014. And because of this, because of affordable mass customization, we now can enable innovation in niche markets. I don't know how many of you have heard of the idea of the long tail, but it's the idea that there are these very niche product categories that aren't, you know, 100,000 people that want access to it. It's maybe 10 people or 100 people or maybe even 1,000 people. But those 1,000 people have a real need, and nobody's solving that need because there's not enough of a demand, and the economies of scale don't make sense for any of the manufacturers or any of the companies to really cater to that. With 3D printing, that changes. All of a sudden, it becomes a one-to-one relationship with the end customer. And obviously, looking at SOLS is an incredible example of that. Each product that we create only exists once. Sometimes I see the products coming out of the printer, and I look at them, and I'm like, this is the singular one that will ever exist in the entire world. And if we want to repeat that, obviously, we still have that digital file, and we can do that, and we can repeat that. But it's really and truly made on a one-to-one basis, and it's done at a price point that's much lower than anything that's on the market. And it has enabled this real cottage industry that exists currently in podiatry to change. It has shifted that industry away from these mom and pop, you know, handmade custom labs that exist today to a systemized approach to mass customization. No inventory. Sometimes I think about the warehouses across the US, the distribution centers full of Dr. Scholl's. And I think about the endless amounts of SKUs, and I think about color patterns, and I think about like weird materials stuck together and flowers and size 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. And then I think about how many of those are not getting sold, and I wonder like what amount of overstock they have, and it scares me a little. And then I think about SOLS, and I'm like, oh, thank God, we are never going to have that. We are never going to have overstock. I have had overstock in the past and been in the position where, okay, we're closing down our our distribution center and we have all this inventory and nobody wants it, so what are we going to do? And it's hard. Throwing away pallets and pallets and pallets of merchandise that you manufactured for an end customer is hard. The notion of no inventory is amazing because it basically makes possible two things. Suddenly, we have the cost to value alignment. If you're not holding inventory, if you don't have overstock, if you don't have the millions of touch points that go into a product, what that means is the cost of that product can suddenly become much closer to the price of that product, which means the price of that product can come down. Traditionally, if you were to go to your podiatrist today and get a pair of orthotics, that pair of orthotics is going to cost you somewhere between, let's say, $500 to $1,500. And that's because you've got, you know, a million touch points in it, from the lab to the doctor, to the shipping, to the people that are working in the manufacturing center actually making it. And that cost is allocated in different ways across that whole value chain. But with something like SOLS, with something that can be as simple as you as a customer downloading, you know, our app at home, scanning your foot, and ultimately getting a product in the end, you know, at the end at your house, we've eliminated so many steps of that process, and we have the potential to bring that cost radically down and raise the accessibility and standardization of the product category in like a really, really huge way. And the one other thing that's super cool about this is the fact that there's no waste. Because we don't have these distribution warehouses, because we're not manufacturing based upon market research and what we think the market wants, we're manufacturing based upon what the market tells us it wants at the point of order, that means we have no waste. It is effectively a one-to-one relationship with the customer. SOLS are made to order, they're on demand. We do not produce anything until the order comes through our system and is automatically generated, exported as STL, and then ends up at our manufacturer. And frankly, this results in a much faster speed to market that has been possible in the past. What that allows us to do is to capitalize on desire in a way that has never before been possible. If you look at software startups over the course of the past 10 years, there's been a lot of movement towards agile software and lean methodologies. This notion that you release an MVP product with a base level feature set executed at an extremely high level, that it's the minimum way that you can go to market as fast as possible. And the reason that's done is because you're basically in a race. You have a finite amount of capital, and you have to figure out what the market wants, and you have to iterate on that product market fit until you get to a place where you've really aligned with your end customer's desires, and then you can scale within that. With SOLS, it's a little bit different. Not only are we treating a physical product in the same way that one would treat a traditional digital product, but we're constantly learning from our market. We basically shipped SOLS out to a group of, I think, 70 beta testers, 70 doctors, and we asked them, what do you like about the product? What don't you like about the product? And as soon as they came back to us and they said, well, I like this, but I would sell it if it had this other feature, we could go back to the product and engineering team and say, okay, let's iterate on this. Let's add these features. Let's do it in response to the market, and let's do it in a way that allows us to maintain market relevance in a way that has never before been possible. Because we are growing, because we're evolving, we can adapt as a hardware and as a physical good company. I say today that SOLS look nothing like what they're going to look like in a year. Maybe in a year we're making shoes and the sole is just the inside. That is a feasible trajectory for where the company is going. And would I say today we're a footwear company? Yes. Are we an orthotics company? Yes. Could we be a shoe company? Sure. Could we also port our software to other product categories? Absolutely. There's a nimbleness there that if you think about, you know, manufacturing a series of goods in China and then importing it and storing it in the warehouse, like that is not possible with that equation, and it becomes possible with digital manufacturing. And finally, the last sort of core principle is this repeatability. I go back to the notion of the cobbler. At one point in time, you know, cobblers occupied the space where they were making things by hand in their shops, and it was a craft. Today, we've moved to a point where code is craft, where it's still the notion of the cobbler, except for now the cobbler is enabled with a printer or with a machine, with digital manufacturing, and he or she is using this technology to make a repeatable product that can be sold again and again and again. Now, I'm excited about what we're doing at SOLS, and I'm excited about the applications that we've currently built. Where I get really, really inspired is looking at other global opportunities for technology like this. And I look at a group like this out here of students and entrepreneurs and investors and innovators, and I think to myself, where are we going to see disruption? What are the markets that are going to be changed with 3D printing, with digital manufacturing? What will our world look like in 5 years? How will these old companies and this old method of product development fall as more nimble companies enabled with these new digital tools grow and take their place? Invisalign is a company that I've always been incredibly inspired by. This is something that, that I've shared many, many a times, and I found, man, I think 5 years ago when I was back at Shapeways looking at methods for automating the factory, and I Googled automated 3D printing factory and found their factory in Mexico. Invisalign did what we're doing 10 years ago. They did it when 3D printing was barely known about outside of the industrial sector, and they created aligners for people's teeth. They created a scan-to-generate-to-print system that now supports production of 40,000 custom aligners per day using 3D printing technology and sits at a $4 billion market cap. This is an amazing success story of how this technology and how digital manufacturing can be used to create and build new kinds of product businesses. Beyond that, though, obviously, I mean, looking at the footwear industry, we see a $170 billion industry in the US, which is still supported by basically sweatshops in China. There are amazing, amazing opportunities here. And sometimes I think to myself, if one could buy a non-custom shoe for $200, or one could buy a perfectly fit custom shoe for $200 that also is, let's say, sensor enabled and can tell you and feed you back information about yourself and about your gait and about your habits, well, why would you buy a non-custom shoe? And these are the sorts of questions that you should be asking. Other categories that are interesting, prosthetics, obviously, because of the high price point, helmets, shin guards, clothing, here again, braces, any products that fit onto our body. I imagine a world in which our body exists as a scan in the computer. We get up in the morning. If we want to buy products, we buy products that are fit for us, and they exist at a singular point in time for us. I'm excited to see the companies that begin to take form in this space. I'm already seeing things happening from what we're doing at SOLS to what other companies are doing with headphones. I see companies starting to try and tackle with clothing. I think everybody's looking to answer the same question. How do we go from a landscape where mass manufacturing is common to a landscape where customization is king? And we're getting there. We finally have the tools to do it, but now it's time for us to actually make it happen. Thank you.
You got 5 minutes. So we're going to do about 5 minutes of questions. By the way, it was super inspiring. It feels like we're on the early days of 3D printing. Like it's sort of like the possibilities are sort of endless.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're just at the beginning. Everybody's been really excited about the maker revolution, and obviously I am too, seeing companies like MakerBot and all these FDM printers rise. But now I think the focus starts to shift to the application layer, and the question that we should be asking is not what machine should we be using, but where is this technology relevant? What markets are going to change, and how can we build businesses that drive that change forward?
I have this business idea of a 3D printer that prints other 3D printers, and then we just sell. I haven't gotten far with it. Okay, so talk about the New York City entrepreneurial community. How has it helped you? How has it catalyzed your growth? Good question.
Absolutely. I think the community is incredibly, incredibly important. You know, having a network, that's one of your best advantages. Being able to walk into a room to not only know people, but basically to say, this is what I need and this is what I'm looking for, and can you introduce me to other people that can help me with that? Really, really helpful. I go out to the Valley quite a lot now, actually, and I see the community out there, and I see that is what New York will be, I hope, in, let's say, the next 5 years, and I'm so excited to be a part of that and to be building that and to welcome other people into the fold.
So someone asked, what kept you going for those 4 years when you kept failing at startups? A little harshly written, but you know, I'm sure there were some dark days there.
Yeah, absolutely. There were many dark days. I think it's hard when things aren't moving in the direction that they should be moving in, because what you keep asking yourself is, okay, well, let's just iterate and let's try something else, and let's iterate and try something else. And at a certain point, you have to step back, and it's really, really hard to step back when you're in the thick of it and say, okay, this iteration is not working. Is there actually a market here? Is this actually a business? And it could be a lifestyle business, which is fine, although I was never interested in having a lifestyle business, which was part of the problem. I was trying to take a lifestyle business and make it a venture capital business, and that was a fundamental, core disconnect that didn't work. I think as far as keeping going, I mean, when you're doing something that you're passionate about, I'm really bad at doing things that I'm not passionate about. So you desperately want it to work, but it's important to both get a bird's eye perspective, but also, detailed on the ground, look at what you're doing.
So someone asked about raising your Series A. I happen to know that a heavily Cornell-based fund,
yes.
Lux,
yes.
is one of your main investors.
Cornell is like a recurring theme.
You can't get away from us. Tell us about raising your Series A and kind of how that went, what you've learned.
Sure. So I actually spoke at a Lux event, I think 2 nights ago, to quite a few Cornell investors in the audience. So raising our Series A was actually really, really easy. Raising our Series Seed was really, really hard. The seed series, I think, was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done. While building a company is much harder. But raising the seed series when you have an idea and you don't have a product and you don't have any validation, you're basically like blindly asking people to trust you, and you're selling a vision that doesn't yet exist, is one of the most challenging things that you can do. What we found was that once we were able to get one person to commit, you basically say, okay, it's not about like raising $5 million out the gate, it's raising like $10,000. And if you raise $10,000, you can raise $15,000. If you raise $15,000, you can raise $50,000. You raise $50,000, you probably get 100. You raise 100, you probably do $1 million, $1 million, 10 million, 10 million, 100 million, and it just like keeps going. We made the mistake of going out the door and saying we needed all this money and had no product, and that's challenging for investors that ultimately, I think, want to punt on that decision. We had a lot of, oh, this is interesting, but we'll come back to you later. And some of those people did come back to us later and invest, but that was nice to see. Just to touch back on the Series A for a second.
Yeah.
The Series A happened very serendipitously. I have employed a method of continuous communication with our investors as a way to keep the story going, to keep people excited and involved in what we're doing. I basically send an email every Sunday. It takes an hour out of my Sunday. Sometimes I think about not doing it anymore, but then I get so much positive feedback on it. I'm like, okay, I have to keep the Sunday email going. But one of our Series Seed investors, Lux, they basically came back to us and said, you've made an incredible amount of progress in a very short period of time. You know, honestly, the idea is nothing without the execution. We want to help you execute faster. We want to help you build faster. Our team is very, very multidisciplinary, which means that even while we are still a small company, we have a lot of skill sets that we have hired for, and a lot of different types of people that we've brought into the company. And they wanted to help us build that. So they came back with an offer on the table, and we talked about it. I wanted to bring in one more investor that could support a Series B down the line, which I did. We brought in the Founders Fund, and they combined with Lux and all of our other investors. Scott Belsky, who's not here tonight, actually was one of our first angels, have been an amazing support to what we're building.
And just as a comment on that, one of my mentors in venture, Jeff Busking at Flybridge, said VCs are in the extrapolation business. They take limited data and extrapolate. And I think you are among the best at showing that you've made progress in a short period of time and communicating that out. I think it's really helped you.
I think it's critical, and it keeps you honest also, because it's so easy as an entrepreneur to be like, oh, this week like things aren't going as well, and things like will not go as well as you want them to, and it's fine. But you know, you say these things aren't going as well as I want them to, so maybe I just won't tell anybody. But then all of a sudden your metrics drop and you haven't told anybody, and then there's a shock factor down the line. So it's best just to keep it transparent, keep it open, communicate what you're working on, and ultimately, you know, take people on the journey with you.
So Andrew talked a lot about high unemployment rates in lots of parts of the country. Here in New York, in the tech scene and in the Valley and elsewhere on the coast, it's like a negative unemployment rate, it seems, for engineering talent.
Absolutely.
How do you hire in that condition?
Yeah, hiring is hard. I think what we're doing is unique, and what I've actually heard a few times is that people are really excited about working for companies that actually help people. So the idea that like we're building a product that helps people, that fundamentally has the capacity to literally change the world and to change how everybody walks, that's pretty compelling of a value proposition, and that's pretty powerful. From a cultural perspective, I mean, I think a lot of those things rang true and are all things that we've either faced and we're doing well, some of them we're not doing so well, some of them we're learning and trying to do better. I mean, building a company is a process. We look at all the traditional sort of like means for hiring people. I use AngelList. I like AngelList a lot. It's probably the first place I always go to look for people. Also networks, just asking around in the networks for points of reference. It's always easier to hire someone if it's came through somebody that you know. It's why those networks are so important, because there's a level of trust there. You're like, okay, well, if that person that is really, really great is telling me this person is good, then even if like I'm like maybe only like 90% sure, like that goes a long way, and like they probably are good. So make those relationships and get to know people that can ultimately open the door to startups, because it's not always clear who's hiring and how to even get into the world.
Well, congrats on all the progress. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks so much. Thanks, guys. Thanks.